Alright, so I went ahead and installed an amplifier and subwoofer in my 22 WRX with a Harman Kardon sound system, and I wanted to share my installation in case you guys want to do something similar. So in this video I'm going to show you how to install the amp wire kit. So essentially we're running the power cable all the way from the battery to behind the seat right here, and I'm going to show you that entire process. So to give you a sense of what that entails, you can see the cable already installed right here, go into this fuse right there and onto the back of the seat where I just showed you. The process is very similar to the previous generation of WRXs, and it's even easier with this generation, but I'm going to share with you every single thing that I learned while performing this installation. So let's get to it. So before I get too far, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of the amp wire kit. This is the bedrock of your sound system, right? This is what's going to provide all of the power to the amplifier, and the amplifier is going to consume a lot of power. This part has to be done right. You cannot cheap out at this point, because not only is it important for your components, but it's a lot of work. You don't want to have to undo the work that you're going to do right now. So what I have here is the amp kit that I selected. This video is not sponsored, by the way. This right here, for my purposes, is a 4-gauge. 1500 watts RMS is what this can go up to. I'm not getting nowhere near 1500 watts RMS, but it is important to have in mind what your expectations are and what you might want in the future when you're selecting your amp kit. This is a very good middle of the line. Most people will only need 4-gauge or less, and what I'm installing is 500 watts RMS. So this is essentially overkill, but I do want to install something that is future-proof in case I do change my mind in the future. Not all kits are created equal, so this is a 4-gauge, so is this right here. And if you look at the difference between these two, it is night and day. This is oxygen-free copper. This is a high-quality, very flexible, easy to install. And the shield on this is far thinner than the shield on this. That might sound bad, but that means that there's more strands over here for those electrons to flow through and feed your amplifier. This right here is supposed to also be 4-gauge high performance cheap wire. This is more like 8-gauge, if that. So I would be very careful. Don't cheap out. Buy an amp kit that is adequate for your sound system. And if you decide to build your own kit, your power wire and your ground wire has to be the same gauge. Your ground wire has to be as short as possible, and make sure that you have the inline fuse that goes close to the battery. This fuse right here is not for your components. This fuse is for your protection. It is necessary. Don't omit it. I'm going to talk to you more about this here in a second. The kits already come with a properly sized fuse like this one right here. It'll already come with matching ground wires. It'll already come with everything else that you might need. For instance, this right here is for the signal wire that might come from a line out converter or from your head unit. These are, of course, your speaker wires that are going to go to your either speakers or subwoofers. And this right here is going to be your remote turn on. This is going to be the cable that's going to provide your amplifier that 12 volts to turn on, not to power it, but to turn on. It's a signal wire essentially. Okay, so it's time to talk a little bit about the routing of the power cable through the car. The goal is to get this cable from the engine bay, from the battery specifically, to the inside of the car, the cabin where the amplifiers are going to be installed. And the problem with that is that there's a firewall right there. The firewall is essentially sealed. It's sealing the engine bay from the cabin to prevent all of the heat from the engine, to prevent all of the noise from the engine, possible air, possible dust, whatever the case might be, from entering the cabin of the car where you drive and where you're supposed to be comfortable. For that reason, everything you see here that's going to the inside of the car is usually very sealed. All the cables are going through grommets, and there's really no place to just grab a cable and stick it through and go to the other side. In older vehicles, it was an easy thing to just grab a spot on the firewall, drill a hole through it, put a grommet there, and then stick the cable through it, and that was easy to do. And that's still an option with these vehicles. However, I don't like to go there if I don't have to. This particular car, I don't have to. I'm going to show you exactly where I'm going to route this cable. I kind of got lucky here, but always look for a way into the car that doesn't involve having to drill. So naturally, I want to simplify the routing of the cable as much as I can. And since the battery is on the right side of the car, as I'm looking at it right here, it would be much easier to just route the cable on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to route this cable through here and along the side of the car and inside the car. And I'm going to show you exactly where I'm going to do that in this particular car, the 22 WRX. Before you begin any electrical work on your car, make sure you disconnect the negative battery cable. Usually a 10mm wrench is all you need. To route the cables I just showed you, you have to remove some trim pieces, but thankfully they are pretty easy to remove. This one is only held in place by 3 pop clips. In the Wheelwell, if you have mud flaps, be sure to remove those. These pop clips have a center pin that just pushes in, and then you can easily remove it. The mud guards we don't have to remove completely, only about halfway. These clips have a center pin that screws out, and then you can pull the pin out. After removing the mud flaps, there should be 4 more pins. When you get to about this point, you'll be good to go. And we did that just to get to this access hole right here. This cable you see here opens your hood, and right above it, there's an unused grommet, which is where we're routing the cable. This is the view from the inside. You can see the cable already installed there on top in a perfect spot and out of the way. Before routing the cable, it's helpful to install the fuse on a tabletop. All of the tools you see me using are linked in the video description. The location of fuse placement is clearly labeled on the cable. Now, I'm using ferrules here, and they are pretty cheap, so no reason not to. Ferrules maintain the integrity of the strands when they are clamped down on the fuse. Not 100% necessary, but highly recommended, as they make for a cleaner install as well. When cutting the sleeve, take care not to cut the shield. When you find the spot where the shield is being removed, go slow and make sure you don't cut any of the strands. Use an X-Acto knife as needed to make fine cuts. With the ferrule installed, make sure the strands go all the way to the end. Insert it into one end of the fuse and tighten it down. Turning the screw will clamp the ferrule firmly in place. The other side is of course the same. Give the two ends a good tug to make sure they are clamped enough, and that is it. I decided to place the fuse under the cover right here, out of sight and out of mind, making sure that the battery connector reaches all the way to the terminal properly. With the fuse in place, the rest of the cable gets fed through here on down to the wheel well. And this right here is the grommet that I just showed you. It's sitting right here on the body of the car. You literally can push it in like that and it pops right out. If you can't do it with your fingers, just use like a screwdriver or something to push it, but it comes right out and then it falls into the inside of the car. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna make a hole right here in the middle to push the cable through. That way we don't have just this big hole there that the cable's just sitting and it doesn't chafe against the metal of the car. So here's what it looks like. Got a little off center, but no problem at all. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna stick the cable in like this, and then we're gonna put the grommet back on the body of the car, and it's like a perfect seal. So just like that. All right, so let's get to work. Okay, so with that rubber grommet out of the way, we can proceed to run the cable through the inside as you see me doing here. When the cable is through, you might want to pull it from the inside as you push it from the outside to keep it from getting tangled or caught on something. It might help to have someone inside the car helping out with this. On the inside, we're going to slide the grommet with the hole we made through the cable all the way to the entry point in the car and snap it into place. And again, this is a view of what that's going to look like. Okay, so before I move on and button all this up, I wanted to show you exactly the routing of this cable so that there's nothing left for the imagination. All right, this is the cable right here. It's going to end up plugged in right there. All right, the cable's going this way. It'll get tucked in on the side right there. Going in this way. There's the fuse right there. All right, it's going to go this way and on down right there. So let me show you from underneath so you can get a good view. There's the cable right there. So I went ahead and zip tied it to that spot right there. Then the cable runs that way, and right there, the hole that we identified earlier. So very quickly, this fuse right here that comes with the amp wiring kit is very important, because this fuse right here is meant to protect you in the case of an accident, or in the case that the cable comes into contact with the body of the car. Remember, the body of the car is all grounded. It's tied directly to the negative battery terminal. So if that cable right here anywhere in the car touches the body of the car, is the same thing as you shorten it from this terminal to that terminal right there. So that's the reason why this fuse is put so close to the battery. So essentially everything after the fuse, the entire run of the cable after the fuse, is protected by this fuse, and everything before it is not. But we could take the chance because that's a very short run right there. But certainly for the rest of the car, we want that protected. So as you probably already noticed, the cladding along the wheel well is off. And as if I didn't need another reason to hate that thing, it gave me some issues in putting this plastic piece back. I did not intend to take that off, but then when I took this off and tried to put it back in, it was essentially impossible. I tried for 45 minutes and I just could not get this piece right here to go between the cladding here and then the metal of the car where it's supposed to go, and it was just deforming up here. You could try to leave that on at first, and if after you do this part, you remove this, you can put it back on properly and it doesn't give you a hard time, more power to you. But if it does, then the solution to that is obviously to remove the cladding. The rest of the installation is essentially just cable management. The car already has cables and harnesses throughout, so we just have to decide where the amplifier is getting installed. Usually the trunk is the most ideal spot because it has plenty of room. If you're installing a small amplifier, sometimes they fit neatly under one of the seats. It's essentially up to you. I'm installing mine in the trunk on the back of the seat, so I am going to route this power cable all the way back there, secured in place underneath all of these trim pieces that you see me removing here. This is all very basic, but there's a few best practices to keep in mind. It's best to route the power cable on one side of the car and the RCA on the other to prevent the high current flowing through your power wire from introducing noise and distortion, which you will be able to hear through your speakers. Make sure your power cable is secure along its entire run. Some zip ties will do the trick. Also ensure that the cable cannot get pinched by a moving part like the seat backs when being folded down. As important as the power cable, the ground cable needs a solid, clean grounding point very close to the amplifier. If you have this car and install your amp back here, you are in luck because there's already a perfect bolt behind the seat, and all we're doing is installing the cable there as you see me doing. If you decide to use a different bolt, make sure that the metal the bolt sits against is not painted. If you need to, use a Dremel tool to remove the paint and roughen up the installation point so that you can achieve a solid, perfect ground. That's gonna do it for this video. Be sure to check out the other videos in this series to see the rest of the installation. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'll see you next video.